Ready.
Hi, everybody. This is Behavior Management in the Art Classroom, and I am Miriam Cutelis.
And I'm Aletha Keogh.
Okay, we wanted to tell you a little bit about ourselves, then we can get started. I've been teaching for 22 years. I am national board certified. I have a master's in special education and special education leadership. You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Blogger, and YouTube. And there is my email.
And Miriam and I are fortunate enough to work in the same school. We work in a Spanish immersion school, and I am the English teacher, and she is the Spanish teacher. We've been working together for, is it 10 years?
I think 11.
Oh, wow. And I've been teaching for 20, and I focused on curriculum and instruction, getting my master's in education. I ran the CETA program through another school, and you can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or contact me through email.
All right. So first, a little bit about the approach that we are going to be sharing today. Our approach is going to be very global, very comprehensive. We want to liken it to sort of like a jelly bean jar, where every piece of advice that we give is just another jelly bean in your pocket of ways to have better control of the classroom or have better behavior management in the classroom. And we are going to first start out with sharing how you can change certain things about your classroom space, how you can plan your routines better, unit planning, prepping for the lessons, and also prepping for supplies, and a little bit about how you can come into school more prepared.
And what our real goal is that we share different ways that we can shift, edit our environment and the spaces we create to make sure you have a successful classroom. And so one thing you want to think about is your classroom space. You know, you really want to be able to find things in the art room. I just redid my room, and it is so nice to have all the drawing materials in one area. I call it the sticky area, tape, etc. It just makes for a better organized classroom.
One thing that we both started doing, I'm not sure when, but several years ago, is have a supply table. And I call it the market. And of course, we don't have fruits and vegetables on it, but it works the same way, where kids can find the items that they have access to for that project. And during cleanup, we have them return the items at that table. One thing to definitely consider in this first classroom space is when designing your classroom space is considering distractibility. And I really love that image of the girl being distracted. So, definitely when you store things, make sure that they're not in the way of where the children are lined up, or you don't have open paint cans where they might be passing through, or toys that are visible, or other kids that might be distracting to them.
And the next thing we're going to talk about is our routine in the classroom. So what you want to do is, with as many different materials, projects, ideas that flow through the art room, you want to keep some of those aspects a routine in the same, so that the children understand exactly how to clean up, exactly how to access materials. And because of that, they're going to feel confident, and they're going to feel safe.
And this is just one example of carrying through just a few routines across all classes. It just makes life much easier. This is one such example. At the beginning, when they come in, one thing that I keep the same every class is, like, we do a very quick breathing routine where I breathe deeply 3 times, and then the kids breathe deeply 3 times. We go over the objective. We have a little share time about what it is that we're going to do. We make art, of course, and then clean up. So there's always that very few things, but definitely keep those things the same. The one thing that you definitely want to keep the same is the way that they come in and go out of the classroom. It really helps because transitions already are really difficult for kids. So definitely work on planning a very firm routine, like where they walk, how they come in. I put a picture of a route in there because you do want to think about how they walk in. You don't want them to just flood in all around your tables. You want them to come in a certain way. It does help them stay nice and calm. I highly recommend a seating chart. I've talked to several teachers, and a lot of times kind of don't start out that way, but it ends up that it really, really helps having a seating chart. I have one where I drew these words on a piece of paper and then I photocopied it. It's a very low tech way of keeping it. I keep it in a binder. As you can see, I made my own tabs out of masking tape. Aletha's a little bit more posh.
I just love a colored tab,
I
but
know. Look at this. Yes.
yes, and I love my laminating machine. I do. So I use these every single year. I printed them once, I laminated them, and all I do is use a Sharpie, some alcohol, and wipe it down. And this is just the way I assign each class their seating charts. And it really, I agree with Miriam. It's really good. And it also makes the kids feel safe. You know, they know exactly where their workspace is. I can just hand students a visual warm up or, you know, a drawing activity before the class starts, and they will know exactly where to go.
And imagine how much time we save by those little
Mm-hmm.
I would have of who they're sitting with that day. I mean, you're just saving an enormous amount of time.
Very true. And of course, we all know preferential seating. Don't ever be afraid to switch it up. And you don't have to make a big deal of it. You can even have all the tables changed, but definitely pay attention to each class and take little notes and work it until it feels right. And again, that is the student's workspace. So tell them, invite them to stand and work, sit and work. Um, you know, we have luckily access to iPads. Tell them they can time lapse their artwork. Um, but definitely invite them to do what they need to do in their workspace. And absolutely, just like lining the process of coming in and out of the classroom is so important. Another thing, especially in the art room, which is full of talking and buzz, is how you get the students' attention. So whatever you decide, whether it's a clapping or any kind of noise or flickering the lights, but it's all consistent. The routine is the same.
And teach what's expected. It's not the bell, it's the fact that you taught what it is that you want to happen when the bell rings. Because a lot of times teachers will ring the bell again and again and again and again. And it's not the bell. You have to actually teach what it is that you want their behavior to be when you ring the bell. Here's mine. And I ring the bell and I put 3 fingers up. And I taught them that when I put 3 fingers up, that means I want you to sit. When I have 2, I need everyone to be quiet. And when I have 1 finger up, with the little kids, they usually put their hands together. But with the older kids, it just means I don't want anything in your hands, like no iPads, no pencils, no scissors, no paints. Because oftentimes they will be fiddling with them if they have something in their hands. Again, don't assume that they know just because the material might be familiar, such as a scissor. We've all handled scissors since we were 4, 3, 5-year-olds. So just because it's a familiar material does not mean that they know how you want them to use those materials.
And remember, it is never, ever a bad time to reteach. If you see that your procedure isn't working, your routine isn't working, be honest with the kids and say, this isn't working. Let's try a new way. And always take time to reteach and just restart.
Especially if they use the brushes like this.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah,
love
we
that
see
picture.
students
It's
that are,
giving me
unless,
a little bit of a hot
yeah, unless you have someone
nervous.
else to paint the hands.
So here I learned this somewhere, and it's about using switching from punishment to development. And so when a child does something that they are not supposed to be doing, oftentimes we go directly to punishment, or go sit on the rug, or go and we think of punishment. But let's always immediately jump first to how can we develop what they don't know? How can we teach them? And of course, if they did something they're not supposed to be doing, assume that they don't know what is the right thing to do, and take that time to teach what it is that you're expecting.
And our next topic of conversation is going to be unit planning, and why at the beginning of each unit, collage, printmaking, painting, you always want to start with just exploration.
And I started with three different drawings that students would or might do during an exploration time. Like, you just give them markers and pencils or Sharpies or whatever it is you're giving them to draw. And then let's say they produce this set of works right here. And you would take that back and you would look at it, and from what the materials that they created, you would draw a more succinct idea of what it is that you would need to teach them. So let's take that one drawing only. And for example, you would work on, let's say, large and small shapes, work on identifying the shapes by name, work on identifying different kinds of lines by name, drawing those lines, knowing the difference between lines and shapes, meaning of some of these shapes. For example, a heart, what does a heart mean? Or definitely just identifying parts of your body, which is something somebody, by just looking at this drawing, you would definitely need to work on. And something you would not work on for someone this age by looking at this drawing is like gesture drawings, for example. And this is just one tiny example of the value of exploration. And just sort of whenever you start, let's say, a drawing unit or any unit, you would want to just sort of give them the materials and see what they're able to do, take notes, and from there move forward.
And so what Miriam and I have found the most successful, and we learned, I mean, knew it before the pandemic, but didn't we just like accelerate our slideshows, because you can dump everything into it, including worksheets, anything. So make sure you have everything included in your slideshow, and you can always refer back to it and add and edit. And exactly what I said, you can edit your slideshows from year to year. So they just become better and better and more rich.
I wanted to also talk about, you've also mentioned already visuals, and I'm sorry, excuse me, the value of visuals. For example, we taught a unit, I think it was a collage unit, I'm not sure, where we taught the kids creating hybrid animals. And just this image alone, or this slide alone, shows you the value of using visuals, because I could describe it verbally, like what it might look like when we mix a crocodile and a bear, and it makes I don't know, croc-a-bear, whatever that is. But when you have it in images, it's so much clearer, and just the value of visuals is very, very clear over here. When I also say visuals, I use a lot of visuals in the commands. I use a lot of visuals when we do songs. I'm sorry, visuals, I mean American Sign Language. And if we're going to use our hands, or we're going to use signs for things, let's use the correct sign language. So I will often look up how to say stop, or how to say before, and eventually the use of that, the kids will begin to get a lot of that, especially English language learners. In our case, since we teach in an immersion school, using the hand signals, very, very helpful. Pre-writing questions in your slideshow is super important, just because you will come up with much more amazing questions when you're home creating your slideshow than when you are on the fly teaching a class or you're dealing with kids in front of you. It's much easier to come up with great questions. Plus, the students are able to read the questions on the slideshow, which is really good for language arts as well. How to frame it means when you, the way that we present the units. So this is a great example. We've worked with recycled materials to create sculptures. The way that we present it, or the way that we frame it, is we say, we don't say we will make buildings. We will say we will be making sculptures, or we will be creating sculptures using recycled materials. We will not limit what it is that the end product is, because what that does is the kids that, let's say, are not interested in making buildings will then be less interested in the project. So a lot of times a wider umbrella is able to bring in a lot more engagement. And here, I love this chart, is engagement is the opposite of negative behavior. So the more engaged students are, the less negative behavior you will notice in your classroom. And this is something that came out of just my daughter's class. She was always saying as she was getting older, a lot of the teachers didn't have less and less and less work time. There's more and more teacher talk. And so we tried to be very faithful to having 70% work time as a must in the art classroom, as a way to maintain high engagement levels.
And what we also do when we are working in our slideshows is have clips of either of us working or of different YouTubes. And if you can't crop a clip and insert it into your slideshow, then put the time that you'd like to start the video, so then that morning you have the video already pulled up in the background and you have it set at the exact time, and you don't have to worry. It just saves a lot of time.
And also there's theater mode for anyone who's worried about those side videos that are always popping up on the in the YouTube videos. You can also embed them, but a lot of times if your internet service is slow, the embedding will be slow. So definitely in the background. Learning to pivot. If the part about taking notes is really important, because as you progress, let's say you did plan a unit and it has about 3 lessons within the unit already, or you're 3 lessons deep, you're still taking notes and still observing what kind of difficulties students are having with the lessons, and pivoting meaning like adding maybe more information. Maybe you notice they don't know a certain vocabulary word, or they don't know what a shape is, or they don't know the difference between a shape and a line. Then you would need to add more slides into your slideshow. I'm just going to go in here.
And so what we really try to focus on is student-centered instruction. So this is an example of a lesson we taught about gesture and superheroes. And instead of saying we're all going to make one superhero, we gave students not only visuals with the gesture and practicing the body, but also we gave them a salad of different superhero headgear and masks, and really just giving access to all those visuals and all those resources so that they are able to come up with these interesting and unique artworks. And your objective should always be, number one, kid friendly, super simple. Don't pack your one lesson full of objectives. You really want to just have one clear objective, attainable goals, so that everybody feels successful, and make sure you're reading that out loud so that you and the students are both on the same page. And again, it's so important. And Miriam has really taught me this too, is that embedding that exploration, you get so excited to get to that end product, but what's so important is the exploration process for you and the students.
And one way that you can tell that it's happening where the students are engaged in a positive way is that it really should feel like everyone is busy doing something. They're not necessarily needing you as much, but they are talking to their neighbors, but they're talking around the subject matter that's going on. And it's a very exciting thing when it happens. One thing we want to make sure is that when you have students that are struggling with the material, that we don't drone or sort of give them activities that are drone activities, meaning like, oh, let's just give someone who's struggling a coloring page. I mean, that is just boring for that child, and they will probably act up even more. So one of the things that we've done is that students that the expectation is the same, but we obviously need to break down the material a lot more. So thinking about the discrete skills that they need to be able to accomplish the same thing. So here we put a scaffold, and the student with special needs, or maybe a English language learner, might need a couple more scaffolds. You might need to give them vocabulary words. You might need to give them an agenda with a 1, 2, 3 steps every time they're working, so that they still meet the same objective as the other kids.
And you always want to prepare for class. Make sure your materials are clean, accessible, and ready to use. You don't want to waste time pouring paint, etc. So, prep as much as you can.
And one way to do that is to think about, Aletha already talked about the objective and how it should be simple. And part of the reason that it should be simple, also, it should match the time that you have. We have 35-minute classes, and then the older kids have 2 35-minute classes. So the objective should match the time that you have. And it should also be a nice, clean objective. So here's one example of the objective of the same superhero lesson unit that we did, that we just demonstrated. So it's choosing from a menu, or like Aletha just said, a salad, a menu of superhero clothing to create a new character. So this is sort of an example of some of the resources that we might offer, where it's just like a lot of different possibilities. And that's what we mean by resources. And we also have to offer a language objective. So here in this case, it's describe your outfit. So that's one class. Next.
And and our next topic is supplies. You really want to have a huge variety of interesting materials. You don't want to just have crayons out. Have crayons, skin colored crayons, glitter crayons, metallic. I love metallic and fluorescent. And Miriam introduced me to the fan brushes. Oh my goodness, the kids go crazy. So just having, and recycled materials are so important. The first thing that goes when we're doing those open play are all the recycled materials.
And I want to
take advantage. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is parents, like, make a wish list of recycled materials. There's really no excuse. I've worked across the gamut as far as like how much supplies you're able to purchase, and parents can supply amazing amount of materials, recycled materials.
And just like Miriam was saying earlier, remember, you are always introducing each material as if it has never been used before, so that, again, those students know exactly how you want the materials to be used in your classroom.
Did I cut you off?
No.
Okay. Choose supplies wisely. So for example, here's just one tiny example of what we mean by that. depending on your time. So there's like a little cute ratio. So let's say the kids had an assembly and you only have them for, let's say 10 minutes, which has happened to all of us. You might give them a paper that's 5x7 and a pencil. That's it. That's all they have time for. Let's say you have them for an hour and 10 minutes. And so you might be able to give them larger pieces of paper. I mean, that's just a tiny example, but always think about the time you have and sort of have this sweet spot ratio for the time you have. Same thing about size. If you are painting, let's say with kindergartners, and you have 35 minutes, you might not want to give them a big old brush because they're going to finish that painting in exactly 3 minutes. And then you will have paint all over your tables. You will have paint all over the children and the floor, and it's not going to work. So I oftentimes will choose to give them tiny brushes, a big paper. If you have 35 minutes, they're going to have a great time. And everything will stay nice and organized. Yes, we're all about sharing, but when you're working with young kids, if you have enough supplies for little ones, you will have a lot more sanity for everyone. Notice they all have the same color red scissor. I will often for one table, I have 4 kids per table. So if I have 4 red scissors, I will give 4 red scissors to that table. Again, sanity on all around.
And again, especially with the little ones, Miriam's correct. I mean, it can all go haywire very quickly. So make sure your supplies are reachable. Make sure the kids can access everything easily. And when you're passing out, don't spend time letting students choose. Even when you have helpers, explain to the helpers. You're just everybody gets what they get and they don't get upset. And it just makes for a much smoother class. And students are still going to make great art no matter what color paper they have. And now we're going to focus on the teacher, how you behave in the classroom.
Okay, so voice matters. Volume, your tone, the word choices. It gets a lot easier where you don't even think about it anymore as you the longer you teach. But definitely you'll notice that certain tones, certain volumes work better. I've known amazing teachers that have like rarely raised their voice. I will often have to get a sweet voice in order to get not trigger certain kids. So you will know what that is, but you please do experiment with your voice, volume, and tone, and notice what it is that it does. Be a scientist.
And always speak in positives. So instead of saying stop running, say walk. Or instead of screaming about everyone being too loud, say we're doing quiet talk right now. So just making sure you're always speaking in positives really helps the students just de-escalate any situation.
And talking about de-escalating, being an eagle or having an eagle eye for anything that might sort of again, it gets better with time, but you just sort of never give your back to the whole class. You're always super aware of where everyone is, because it's a lot easier to catch negative behavior before it gets worse. And I feel like you know when it's going to happen. So if you just look around and if something's tensing up, you can approach those kids and take care of it before things get overheated. Oftentimes things get worse if they don't get paid attention to. So definitely keeping your back to a bunch of kids and not paying attention to what's going on is going to allow things to escalate. Also be aware of your own emotions when you walk in. I've noticed this with myself. Like if I'm really tired at the end of the week, I'm like, wait, the kids are really misbehaving this week. And then I realize it's me. I'm the one they're noticing my shortness, my sort of lack of patience and they're acting up. So a lot of times it's like a reflection of where I am. So be very aware of your own emotions. Again, make sure the kids are able to hear you, they're able to see you, and simplify your instructions to like 1, 2, 3. Again, use sign language. I always use stop and I use sit. I always say, what did we do yesterday? Hear and see. I'm always using both my words and my hands so that I don't have to actually raise my voice as much.
And always do a quick review of what is being asked the lesson. Like right before our students go to the tables, you say, okay, what are we going to do again? Step 1, step 2, step 3, and then send the students on their way.
Always explain why. I think that kids are much more invested in following certain instructions if they understand the reason. A lot of times they get triggered if they think you're just, willy-nilly want them to do this because you want them to do this. But if you explain to them, okay, this is much better, the outcome will be much better, or give them an exact reason, they will often be more apt to follow directions without any problems. And if you do have issues with behavior, and you threaten a consequence, it's important to put in the legwork and follow through. This is my list of how I follow through, and it kind of gets more intense. So normally I'll just give kids a warning, a verbal warning, and I'll just say it in the most neutral tone possible. I'll say, you have a warning. And then if I have to talk to them again, they'll sit on the rug for a few minutes. I do have a timer, like a visual timer that has that red line so they can see when it runs out, and I'll set it for like 3 minutes. And when they see it ring, they go back to their table, and it's nothing, usually they just immediately go back. Now, if it continues, then I'll talk to them outside, and there's something very severe about, oh, the teacher wants to talk to me outside. And that tends to usually stop it if they're a little bit out of control. And if it's worse than that, then I'll definitely call home. And not, or email. Here we go. Email.
Yeah. And remember, no matter what your communication, you're not telling on the student. You are asking for help. You are asking for a collaboration. And describe the behavior as if you're writing an IEP, just the facts. Do not put your assumptions in any of that. And I like the compliment sandwich. Miriam and I are good at those. So you just begin with something positive, put your concern in the middle, and then end on a positive. And to be safe, always CC the classroom teacher, a principal, a counselor, and definitely don't speed through a email or phone call with a parent. Make sure you have time to write it. And be in a headspace that is positive. Just like Miriam said, your emotions can really affect your attitude. So just make sure you're coming from a good place.
And it might be meaning waiting a day,
Yeah.
Or going,
absolutely. And you're always coming in with a team approach. You're asking them to help you.
And the last thing that I find really helpful, and just to keep track of everything, because a lot of us teach hundreds and hundreds of students, is a logbook. And this is more like a grade book. And I do keep, let's say I notice someone is going to be, is identified for gifted, then I'll put like a little mark in there so I remember to photograph their work. Or if someone is absent consistently, or maybe their behavior is consistently out of hand, then I'll put that in there. So then it's so much easier to just put a little check mark while you're busy in the classroom and you're in the space, because you're not going to remember to do it after the kids leave. And definitely, if you want to have a different book where you keep notes about things, that would be great too. But definitely keep a logbook, keep all the information dated so that you are able to always recall what's going on. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.